So let me introduce the other two panelists. We have Zach Sullivan. He's Operations and Marketing Director at Future Publishing. Of course, you know who they are. They publish more than 50 magazines. And Zach has been leading the entire process of innovation and transformation. And we also have with us Ben Filling with PulsePoint. They are a programmatic platform very much focused on health. So let me start with you, Zach. How do you go about innovating at Future?
So Future's had a colourful history of recent, and some of you in the room will probably appreciate more than others what I'm talking about. So very late 90s, early 90s, very large company entirely built around print, and the company stopped innovating. It got very kind of lazier on what it was doing, and it tried to just harvest what it already had, and the consumers changed and the company didn't. It got itself in a lot of trouble. Now I joined the company about 4 years ago, and it started a transformation about 5 years ago, and we had to restructure the entire company. It lost about 40% of its workforce, reconciled its offices, and we changed almost every process within the business. It was an incredibly painful experience to go through for a lot of people, but what it has done is it's left a legacy within the business about accepting the need for change. And we've had that very painful experience of what happens when you stop innovating. And so then we've created lots and lots of different initiatives and processes within the business to try and foster ideation and to surface those ideas and help give advocacy. And so what we have implemented on the back of having that opportunity to change the whole business structure is very small teams of highly kind of delegated power who are able to create ideas, surface them and test a lot. And it came through in Pete's presentation about that ability to create an idea, test it and experiment a bit, and then scale it and drive advocacy throughout the business. That's what we have tried to create with our entire business structure now, is small teams that can really focus, create solutions to problems, and then drive them throughout.
And do you have a flagship product to show as a result of this process, like they do?
Yeah, absolutely. So we run e-commerce first, for what it's worth. So our platform is called Hawk.
You're in affiliates, just to be clear.
Affiliates, yeah, exactly.
Keep going.
Ours is going to get better. Right? We're going to enjoy this.
So yours is Hawk.
Ours is called Hawk, yeah, exactly. And so we had the affiliate model exactly as Peter referenced there, and we evolved on it a little bit to try and make it more bespoke to the audience that we had and the opportunities that our platform presented to us. And so Hawk matches, it reads the pages that our users are on. It then matches in the back end through API feeds products from different retailers, and then we're able to create a shopping experience on site that we try to replicate other big online retailers and make sure that our users are getting a value additive experience where we're allowing them to read a review of a technical product, be it a TV or a phone or a laptop, at which point we can then help facilitate that transaction. And we're now at the point where we sell a laptop every minute in 5 seconds. So it's nice to get to the point where we're now actually driving so much transactions globally that we have a real, we firmly believe we're adding value to our users.
And you acquired it or you built it?
We built it. It was entirely built in-house. It started very slow. We put it on as a affiliate program, and it was seen very much as just being incremental revenue. It's now an absolute cornerstone of our business. We license the product out to other publishers. We've made it work for other verticals, and we're always looking at new ways to try and innovate on top of it. We're now at the point where we are building new brands where Hawk is the core of the site, and the content is now supplementary to that experience, where we're saying that publishers, where we have seen retailers move much more into content creation, we as content creators are trying to move much more into the shopping experience.
I'd like to talk about that in a moment, how content fits into getting people to an e-commerce experience, how you fit that into your sites. Ben, tell us about Pulse and what you guys, PulsePoint, and what you do, because you've changed the business model recently, right?
Correct. So PulsePoint is an ad exchange, and it helps publishers monetize display and video inventory. But that position in the market, we've felt, is becoming increasingly vulnerable over the past few years as people are shifting away from display and ad blocking and all of these other pressures. It means that sitting in the middle of that ecosystem is becoming increasingly a challenge. So we've kind of innovated in a couple of different ways. Firstly is to build a content distribution platform that aids advertisers and publishers to distribute a piece of content, whether that's editorial or branded content or video, across the wider ecosystem using the power of programmatic to optimize that distribution so it's done efficiently. And the second part is we've decided to focus a lot of our energies on programmatic health and building a programmatic health platform that joins niche publishers, health publishers, with niche advertisers, pharmaceutical advertisers and medical device advertisers, and linking those together in a somewhat of a closed ecosystem to make sure that yields are protected for publishers and that advertisers are secure in where they're actually sending their message.
But I mean, in your case, the adjustment to the business formula was done because programmatic on its own perhaps, didn't have enough traction. Have you transformed through design thinking?
So the PulsePoint was a many-headed beast before it was PulsePoint. It used to be a company called Context Web and Daytran Media and Media Solutions and something else called All Voices. All Voices was a content creation, kind of a blogger network and freelance writer network. There's a lot of publishers that did that a lot better than we did, and we realized there was a gap in the market around the distribution of content, because that's very fragmented. So a lot of publishers will be working with Outbrain or Taboola or Sharethrough or TripleLift, and then there's the social piece as well. You can distribute content across all of these different channels, and that gives you access to a lot of these different publishers, but it's all very bitty. So if you wanted to run a campaign and distribute something, you'd just go with one or two of those partners, and then you wouldn't have the power to optimize across all of these different channels. Make sure that you were distributing your content to the right audience, or in the right way, or in the most efficient manner. So we tried to bring that all together and centralize them. So the motivation was identifying a gap in the market.
If you look across here, the pressures for people to, through digital innovation, get to revenue, real revenue, is phenomenal. So, of course, there are two approaches: to build or to buy. What do you think is the fastest way to get to revenue? You did it through buying, you're doing it through building. Your views as well. What's better? Or is it a combination of both? Build or buy?
There's no better. What's faster is buying, definitely. But we always do the same thing, really. If we think there's an opportunity, and buy a car was a good example of that. One of the pieces that we calculated was, well, what you're actually acquiring, a platform that we knew we'd rebuild. So there's not that much value in the platform. There was a hell of a lot of value in the knowledge within the business. So there's 5 guys who've been doing it for 5 or 6 years, mainly selling new cars, not used, but you can't shortcut that stuff. Yeah. So one of the things we looked at was, well, okay, if we didn't buy them, what would it cost to just build it? Going back to your point of what's quicker. And for us, that equation was a no-brainer. Really, it was very firmly in the side of buying.
But strategically, when you go about it across, there's no, our approach, because actual Springer openly said, we're not going to do this organically, we're acquiring. We have a lot of cash flow, they're selling a lot of daily newspapers. Take all that cash flow and just buy your way into digital future.
Generally speaking, you probably all found it the same in this room. Generally, a lot of digital assets are well overpriced, is what I would say. I mean, we laugh about the fact that so many of them are pre-revenue, not even pre-profit, they're pre-revenue. Yeah. They're just ideas, which relating to this. It's just kind of, and we get offered all sorts of stuff all the time. Dennis has been known as quite an inquisitive business, so we get quite a lot of approaches. There's probably one point a little while ago I was getting probably one a week or one a fortnight, and largely I don't think they stack up the sort of valuations that people are talking about for them. Yeah. So, but that's not to say that we don't consider everything in its own merits, and there's definitely times when acquiring is better.
Build or buy?
Yeah, so we've had a similar experience. It's been a mix of both. It's circumstantial about which one you would choose when. Because we're able to start things up and test quite quickly, we find that building our own solutions in-house is always preferential. And I think to an extent we have a culture where we like to build things ourselves. So we have built our own site architecture, we've built our own CMS, we've built our own tagging system in the back end. And I think that's cultural to our business, that's the preference of what we do. But we've recognised many, many occasions where we are limited in different ways, and I'd love to have Axel's problem with too much cash. That would be a fantastic one to have. Not one that you hear at many publishing conferences, I'll be honest. We're quite cognizant of the fact that we have to work within our means, and so where we get to a limit, we then look to acquire. And it's not always just about acquiring to own it and see what you can do with it differently. Sometimes you look to acquire particular skills or learnings that other organisations bring. And so for Hawk, we bought an Australian retailer called Next Commerce. We bought them particularly because that team had great experience in building taxonomies for retailers. And what they brought to the fore then was the absolute listings of how a retailer would set up their database and how we would match products to user searches. And it was very specific. We just wanted this one core bit of the technology. We've tested different bits of what we acquired on the back of it, but we really wanted that specific piece. Another example is we reacquired one of our brands called Team Rock recently, and they had built a fantastic paywall system.
What do you mean reacquired? You sold it?
We owned it, we sold it, and we bought it back. Welcome to UK media.
Right.
And so we reacquired them recently, and whilst they had been away, they had built this fantastic paywall, and it was exactly the thing again about we were really interested in it. We could see a market trend towards paid-for content or metered content, and when the opportunity arose, and we're like Dennis, we're an acquiring publisher, we wanted to go out there and get it back because we wanted that tech. So it brought us fantastic brands back into the portfolio that matched our core business, but it gave us a new bit of technology we could scale out more widely. And so it's about understanding the opportunity of what you're seeing based on builder buy.
Can I make one other point? Sorry, just because you just made me think about it, which was the bit about talent. So when we've acquired, yes, we've acquired for knowledge and talent, but it's also the cultural piece, which is really interesting, because often when you buy early stage businesses or startup businesses, they have a very different way of thinking, and I think it can be really complementary because they often don't have the corporate expertise, is that the right word? They don't handle staff issues, they don't know how to handle themselves in meetings. A little anecdote I was telling Zach earlier before we started, which I won't repeat in public. But
No, now you must. No, you must.
In the bar at the end of the day, maybe.
Okay.
But it can be really complementary because on that side there's a lot for us to impart about how to run a scaled business, but in the other way there is loads of cultural differences about that there is a real can-do attitude in a startup. I mean, going back to your point about the exercise that you did, just think differently. They're just kind of like, those people tend to anyway, especially if it's their own business. They just get off their arse and do stuff, and they don't accept barriers. They think around problems, which sometimes, not because we're not as clever, but our corporate the dynamic that we've been working in my case, 20 odd years has had an impact on us. So,
Benedict, build or buy? I mean, obviously Google, when they find something, they do have the cash to buy it, but you're also an advocate of indeed building the entire team, the culture. What's your view on this? What do you think is the fastest way to revenue?
You're asking me an impossible question, as a representative of Google. I'll give you my personal take, which is I think we've done both. If you look back at the acquisitions we've made, we've gone for talent and expertise that we didn't have. So I'm thinking of the DoubleClick acquisition, I'm thinking of DeepMind acquisition, but also we are also building and leveraging the skill set we have internally. So for example, all the machine learning capabilities we have is now applied across the whole business in every different silo divisions. So I don't know who has used Google Photo in the audience. That's machine learning. This is really applying some deep expertise in one side that has been applied to a very consumer facing product. Yeah. So I don't know if it answers your question because I'm not saying one or the other. I think we've done both.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, the answer sometimes is you buy to then build internally to spread the technology across, right?
Yes.
I think if there had been someone that we could have bought when we started focusing on health, we probably wouldn't have done it. Because there'd be already someone that was actually doing what we were looking to achieve. Similarly with content, we had the background, but no one else was doing it. So there was a case. There was no other option but to build. And then you focus down on which composite parts for that can you actually buy something for, and if it's there and it's the right price. We're not as big as Google. We can't find a magic money tree to buy every little bit of tech. As nice as that would be, but then that comes with a host of attendant problems as well. If you're building something yourself, you know how it works. If you're buying something, then how is it going to integrate?
Now, AOP, I think, bought or built Slido, which is here. I don't know what the relationship is, but let's bring it up. And there are questions coming up. You can ask questions anonymously, but while they're coming up, let's just open it up to the floor. Anybody, any questions to the panel?
Do you want me to answer that?
Yeah? Well, no, but let's scan.
Okay.
We need to have an uncomfortable silence so people... That's my technique. So questions. There we go. You see? It always works. Question here, and I believe there's somebody scratching their head. So a microphone here, because we do want to record this for posterity. Go ahead.
Future generations.
Hi there. Maybe a question for Pete and for Zach. I'm interested in when you're looking at building an e-commerce platform, is it just a pure revenue play or is it a traffic play as well? And what's the divide between that?
Do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I'll start. So it's really different to the existing business model. When you get into it properly, it changes your business. And so we started it based on affiliates, and it was incremental revenue. We knew that we could put these links on site, we get a couple of points off what was bought, and it added to the bottom line. And it was brilliant because it converts to P&L as pure profit pretty much, so it's fantastic. The more you get into it, the more you see the opportunity, and as you start to develop it, you have to change your thinking about what you're doing, because you're not just adding something into the audience cell. You actually need to create new audiences, and so we have a really unusual tension internally on our biggest site, TechRadar, where lots of our traffic now land on pages where there are no advertising, because we want them to go into an e-commerce user journey immediately. And so we try to keep the page very simple and lean, and we try to build it in the way that we see retailers do. And so it's created, like I said, this unusual tension internally about what type of audience we're now driving, where in the purchase funnel that user is, and what the journey we want them to go in is. And we tried to do that without being too detrimental to the existing business model, but accepting that we needed to diversify what our revenue streams were. So it really has changed the business quite fundamentally on the back of it. Across it, editorial, commercial, everyone's had to change their mindset quite a lot.
Sorry, just to follow up, do you find that user is someone who is already within your community, or are you targeting users that are, or is the e-commerce giving you an ability to target users that's outside of your reach normally?
Yeah.
With the publishing?
It's a really interesting mix, yeah. So as you start to understand the users better about who it is that when you see the transactions and you see the user journey on site, you get a better understanding of what that person is and the research that they've done. And I used to be Auto Trader before, and I understand for car purchasing the same experience about a user used to go to 7 car dealerships and now they go to 1. And it's quite a change about how people make purchasing decisions. And when you understand that better for the audience that you're targeting, you start to look at your audience acquisition differently. And so we now use different platforms and different marketing channels to bring users to the site, because we're looking for very specific users in different exam cases. However, because we've done that, it's given us more funding to try and grow the total audience, because there is an element of just having scale being incredibly beneficial. And so the two can become complementary to one another, where you can be, we need to acquire these very specific users in these channels, but in turn we can take the time to do more generalist content to drive bigger audiences, which is complementary to the existing ad revenue streams.
Right. Reach or revenue? The question, or both?
Yeah, so I'd give a lot of the same answers actually, but just to add to it, I'd say that it gives you a completely different perspective on quality of audience. So as premium publishers, we believe in our quality audiences. If you take my whole portfolio, it's about 25 million unique users, so reasonable sort of size. I mean, there's loads of people in here who've got much bigger audiences, but we're kind of medium-sized. You take Buy a Car, it's only 350,000. But of course, it's going back to the old sort of like print and digital analogy, whereby we used to talk about, again, because I'm very old, print, pounds turning into digital pennies, and it's kind of e-commerce the other way around again, because with a small audience, if they're transacting and making you a lot of money per individual user, it completely changes the dynamic. So whilst all of our audiences, we're trying to build quality, we want people who are really into the subject matter, so they fulfill the requirements of advertisers. E-commerce is to a whole different level, because you're really interested in those converting people. So I'm selling 300 cars a month on 350,000 audience. I mean, I want to sell 1,000 cars. It's not about getting that 350 to 1 million. It's more about the quality of the people who are turning up. You understand what I mean? So it's that kind of reach piece. The second thing I'd say is just picking up on the piece about content strategy. So very much our content strategy now in the rest of our business, as well as Buy a Car, is led by our affiliate revenues, just like it is with you. We started off with our affiliate business saying, well, we've got a lot of content, we've got people coming to the sites who are interested in making purchasing decisions. How do we turn that into affiliates? But very soon that's completely changed to, right at the beginning, what content should we write, which is most likely to convert for different areas. Obviously the pivot of T3 recently into affiliates and into T3 Baby. So I'm talking for you, sorry. We've done the same on some of our brands. We're reviewing completely different sorts of products than we would ever have touched before, because it's about how we can optimize and monetize that for e-com.
And I think that answers that question, so we can remove the top question, because that's been answered in a way that's... But before we open it up more, let me bring Benedict and Ben here. I want to talk about failure because we work with a lot of publishers, and you know, they eventually admit to you that failure is overrated, and that it's good for startups who have nothing to lose other than a few early years of their careers and so on. But as a publisher, it's exhausting. And how much failure is acceptable in one of these processes?
Good question. We used to have, so we don't have it anymore, but we used to have a Courageous Penguin Award, which was all about celebrating the failure, and that was in the commercial organization. And I think it was really well received that, you know, so it wasn't about celebrating the failure, it was the so what, the lesson learned. It's a tough question. I don't know how to answer that. I think it's about promoting a culture where it is acceptable and it comes right from the leadership. So those awards were set up by Philip Schindler when he was running the EMEA business here. And that was a strong signal that it was acceptable and to try to drive innovation. You know, if you have your leader putting up an award for that thing, it's a strong signal. We don't do it anymore, so maybe that tells you something. I don't know.
That leadership thing is really important, though, I think, and that's what I was talking a bit about in my presentation at the end, because, you know, I gave you the example of an acquisition that I got wrong. You know, talk about it. You know,
Yes.
as a leader, say, you know, I got it wrong, and hopefully, on balance, I get more things right and I get wrong. But we all get things wrong. What did you learn from it? What did
Exactly.
it teach you?
It's the lesson, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And if you talk about your own failures, I think that helps in terms of a culture, because otherwise it just becomes lip service. We go, yeah, we love a bit of failure. We don't really.
Ben, how much failure is acceptable?
Well, when I look back at the things that we've tried that haven't panned out, they're largely because we haven't been communicating between commercial side and the tech side. Usually someone in the tech will have a great idea that commercial could knock back and say, well, frame it like this and then build it in a better way. But they don't always ask us, and then it's built and it doesn't work because no one's bought in. Can't drive any revenue from it. And the flip side, the commercial team is like, oh, we've got this grand blue sky idea, but it's going to be incredibly complex to build. We're going to force the tech team to do it, and then it's not going to work because it's distracting them from something else. So failure in that instance is very painful because it's easily resolvable, and it could have been fixed if we'd actually been a little bit better at communicating with each other. And all the cost is always comes down to what could have been built that was better, or could have been built from a more architectural point of view, where you've got a clearer goal in mind.
Verbalized question, or shall we read these? Anybody wants to, you know? Yeah, a question here, please. We could bring the microphone there. And then let's take these. Yeah. Go ahead.
Thanks. Yes, a question really about the dangers, if you think there are any, of using innovation, new technologies to look for new audience, actually at the risk of losing your core audience in the first place.
You first.
Whoever.
Yeah, no, I could jump on that hand grenade. Yeah, it's a constant pressure around. You need to maintain what you have, whilst looking for the new opportunities. The one constant is change, and so there's an element about constantly needing to look to move into new areas. And so, having had the experiences of it getting the company into trouble, we're much more about moving forward and looking at new opportunities and looking into new spaces. And sometimes you need to move into a new area, but it's almost like prospecting oil, right? You might not have tapped the well you're already in. You want to move on to the next thing to continue the growth, to continue the innovation. The point where you stop moving forward is the point where I think you should be worried. And so that point about, from our perspective, you're always moving forward. And we might occasionally change things in the business, and that might be slightly detrimental to what we already have, but we're conscious that we need to be moving forward and progressing constantly.
I think it's a lot less risky in digital, because it's just about the profile of how people consume media in digital. If you take NME, going from what it was to a more mainstream title in print. That's a big deal, okay? But in digital, so we now write about different sort of product types. So there's a danger that could dilute the core audience. I'm just taking an example. But actually, a lot of those articles won't really be promoted on the homepage or index pages. It's a search or social strategy. Somebody hopefully will see that article or go to that article, convert or not, and leave. But there's no brand affinity anyway, really. I want a very low amount of brand affinity. So it's about digital audiences.
But a very good question, and complemented by that other question there at the bottom that says, in this process of diversification, it just disappeared. Oh, at the top now. People come to publishers for impartial advice, and now you're turning into an e-commerce. So indeed, you may betray or somehow antagonize these audiences. They're saying, well, hang on, where is the honest, Dennis Publishing recommendation of the car, or Future Publishing recommendation of a laptop that I used to rely on in the past? Now I come into your sites and I'm being driven into e-commerce, go buy. But where's the journalism, where's the content?
I just think it's a non-argument, honestly. I think to start off with, we want you to buy something. We don't care what you buy. I don't care which car somebody buys. But seriously, it's like I don't make more margin particularly on one car or another car. In product types, you might make more margins. You make more margins in coffee machines than you do in laptops, for example. But which coffee machine somebody buys, apart from the price, is not really relevant.
But the criticism is you're not publishers anymore, you're retailers.
Yeah.
Yeah, retailers are publishers, right? We've all moved into a slightly more blended space in the middle. So So from our perspective, we're helping people make buying decisions. Okay, so we know that. So someone didn't come to my website to read the news, and I haven't then tried to manipulate them to buy a TV while they're here, because that's never going to happen, generally speaking. And the tension's always somewhat existed. When we're commercial enterprises, we've always had a need to make money. And so it's no different. I personally feel from our old advertising revenue model, where there may have historically been pressure to cover certain products or to look to cover certain content types to create commercial relationships for advertising. Well, e-commerce is slightly more... it's you facilitating the transaction that the user was already looking to make. If somebody comes to read a review of a product or they're measuring it against other products, a pretty good buying intent. And what we're doing is to help facilitate that actual transaction. Right. And so we've just moved further down the purchase funnel rather than trying to influence them negatively in any way. And we always try to be value additive in what we do with these products.
Consumer comes first, don't they? One of your first points. So if you get that wrong, you haven't got a long-term business. So if we lose that integrity and credibility, then we are buggered, aren't we? So we're not going to do it. I'm going to just make another point as well, just about objectivity. So I'm going to interrupt you the whole thing. No, so that's what I do. That's my shtick. Okay. You like uncomfortable silences. I like interruptions. But people talk about impartiality in reviews all the time, and I always give the same examples like car reviews. Okay. So some of our car reviewers are 27, 28 years old, and they will get taken by a manufacturer to Las Vegas for a week to review the new version of their car. Why do they do that? Why don't they go to Newport Pagnell? Because it has an impact, doesn't it? Because they're trying to buy favour. They're trying to do this. So I'm not trying to say that we don't try and make sure that all of our reviews are objective, but we're human beings. Reviewers are human beings. There's always some sort of subjectivity in it. They wouldn't invest all that money in doing it if they didn't. So anyway, I'm just making the point that clearly we've got to watch that, but we have to watch objectivity and credibility and integrity in loads of ways.
Anybody wants to come in and we're turning into retailers and abandoning our publishing roots? Anybody? Over there, please. I'm sorry, Ben.
That's all right.
Let's hear from the audience and then to you, Ben. Okay. Then to you. Go ahead, because this is hot. And
whether you use data to segment your audiences, so to work out who may well be purchasing over just looking at reviews, and then if you think they're not necessarily purchasing, whether you'd add advertising to their experience. I know in the gaming world that happens a lot.
Yeah.
Anybody wants to take that on?
Yes, obviously we do, and clearly it's one of the advantages of being a publisher, because you've got loads of touch points. So going back to the audience and scale piece, we do have 25 million unique users coming to our sites a month, so there's all sorts of data points that we can collect. We use our DMP, obviously we're looking at related content, conditional content, all the things you'd expect us to do. But more importantly, we don't care how we monetize a user. We're trying to do whatever is the best and provides the best ROI. That could be through e-commerce, it could be through lead generation, it could be through just straight display advertising. But the one thing we all know, right, is we've got to diversify, because if we just rely on one thing, and 5 years ago probably most of us had 90 95+% of our income coming from in digital, just from ads, it's not viable.
So you would strip down the experience for different users?
Totally, and I think the example that Zach gave of having no ads on certain pages because it's all about conversion is exactly right.
And we see there's a user trend towards wanting greater customization of that experience, regardless of what you're doing. And that's just us changing to the user's needs and wants. We're not trying to force that on them. We're trying to be respectful of what people want, and we try to make that marry up with our business objectives. But our business objectives are driven by good user experience, so the two go hand in hand.
But does that happen on a one-to-one basis yet?
It's not at the moment, but it's an ideal. It's something we would love to get to. There's a lot of technical inhibitions at the moment, things that block it, but things we want to get to. You talked about machine learning. It's going to be a big enabler of it going forward. There's a point about, so we're at 45 million unique users. Creating 45 million unique user experiences every month is really bloody hard. So trying to move that forward is always the challenge.
Ben, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think if the voice of your reviews is consistent, you're okay. But have you guys noticed that your average review score of the products you're looking at has changed since you've become more focused on?
Oh, please do come and ask my editorial team.
Yes.
But again, no, because we have the same conversation because, basically a 3 out of 5 score product just makes people more inclined to buy a 5 out of 5 score product. You don't need to be manipulating in that way, honestly. And there's a few people from Dennis editorial in the room, I think, but hopefully they will tell you the same, which is there's no pressure from us to manipulate scores. There might be directive about what type of products to review because we're moving into different sectors, but not the quality of the score or anything about those sorts of issues because it's all about the user first.
Yeah.
Dennis editorial, are you here? You want to comment?
I saw Esther, sorry,
Yeah,
but
Esther?
you don't do reviews, sorry.
What do you do? Whatever you do, what's the process? How detached are you?
You don't do reviews, sorry,
You
Esther.
don't do reviews, never mind.
I saw
okay.
a couple of faces. So apologies.
Right. Fascinating discussion because, obviously some people still have misgivings, there could be pitfalls and so on. Let me bring Benedict in because you've talked a great deal about the methodology, you've taken us through the journey. I want to talk about people. Who are the right people to invite to this design thinking? Because often the editors, the journalists are invited and then they're not invited. Sometimes these things are led by the marketing teams and so on, technology teams. What is the right mix within publishers to begin this journey of design thinking?
Yeah. So if my colleague Kirsten, who's one of the facilitators, was here, I think she would say as many people from across the organization. So because you want that collaboration, and the successful workshops she's run, specifically with some German publishers, were the one where she had the buying from across the different divisions. So bringing that marketing person, who's all about the customer acquisition with the editorial view and also the product people. So the trick is how you facilitate and make them get in that right state of mind to get to collaborate and be on that vision. But I would say it's all about the leadership, because if you set a strategy and where you're clear on where you want to go, whether you're editorial, whether you're marketing, whether you're product, you should all aim for the same goal. And so bringing all the people around the table to innovate together, bridge those gaps. I mean, there will always be gaps, right? But at least if you're all participating in the process, then you have the buy-in from all the relevant stakeholders right from the beginning. I don't know whether you do that, but to me, I mean, it seems a sensible, process.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I was watching a presentation earlier, and I don't think we deliberately think, and I'm not sure as an industry we deliberately think about innovation to the same extent that Google does, and I think it's part of your success as an organisation and the ongoing growth is around the ability to actually stop and really think about how you're achieving what you're trying to implement. I'm conscious that because the way we've set the business up in terms of its overall structure, it's quite flat with a smaller number of senior managers with larger spans of control, and that to an extent has made innovation easier, because when you get the buy-in at particular levels, you can bring in lots of different functions very quickly to make things happen. But having small groups of people who can commit time and energy to get the product right, the new process right, whatever it might be, and then to scale it across the business is where we've had success. But I don't think it's a one-size-fits-all, because I'm conscious that our businesses are very different to one another, even though they're very similar at the same time. And then when you get into the news publishers, you get into even more niche publications, digital only, print legacy companies, we're also different. How you actually get things delivered into the organizations is quite different.
So in your case, it's mostly marketing and engineers, developers?
No, not at all. I would say it's there'll be a commercial lead, there'll be a senior management lead somewhere in the business. We don't have product managers, so we tend to have business leads. And so by not having a product manager, you kind of make a couple of individuals responsible rather than one individual person. So there'll be someone in engineering who's actually doing the build or doing the technical elements of it, but there'll be someone responsible for the process. But that could be someone in finance, it could be someone in marketing, it could be someone in advertising. It varies depending on what we're trying to achieve.
I think it's really hard actually to get the right people in the room. So we used to run a project, Skunkworks style project, where we took a few people, digital people, stuck them in a completely different building actually. Said you've got no constraints, just think radically and come up with ideas. And they came up with some really good ideas, but also some really bad ideas. And my personal view was there wasn't enough commercial oversight. So one idea, for example, I'll probably talk about, it was called Bash Your Boss, and the whole idea was that loads of exactly. Well, there you go. You see.
No, carry on.
So the idea
that should have come at the reductive stage. You know, you've got the expansion, which
Yeah.
is all about generating
Yeah, possibly.
ideas, and the
So-
commercial person should have come at the
I
reductive.
think you're probably
10
right.
times.
So,
Yes.
I think you're probably right.
Scalable.
Yeah.
Sorry. So as an idea, maybe it was right to do that, but it didn't have enough oversight. So there's probably something in there. Maybe it's Glassdoor, right? So it was kind of like the idea of being able to give to vent and give feedback about your work experience. So maybe really the idea should have turned into Glassdoor, and that's the way to do it. But just having a social sort of site where people slag off their bosses is not very easy to monetize, right? so you know, just as an idea, it's an anecdote, okay, right? But I do think that getting that right, so you don't constrain ideas, like your point about making sure you're open-minded and you know all the problems with idea generation, but at the same time there's enough common sense to make sure this could be something that turns into a proper product. That's the challenge.
Ben, the right mix of people to innovate?
And we've tried those kind of skunk work things before a few times in the past, and really mixed to poor success, because you put a lot of people that are all working on something in a room and get them to discuss and expound on that. They end up with iterations of the same thing. So they often work a lot better if you've got someone with a key idea and solve for that particular problem, which is maybe out of their standard remit. That's what I was speaking about before. If you don't have people from the commercial side and the tech side actually speaking clearly, you can end up with something which is bad for both, or unable to execute on.
I'm not hearing editorial. Tech, commercial.
Oh, definitely editorial. Actually, the Skunkworks project was led by an editorial person.
Okay.
So the idea of Bash the Boss was a content play.
Okay.
But that was the problem, was that there was no commercial oversight at any point until it turned into a thing, and then Felix just said, right, now monetize this. And what do I do with this?
Yeah. And very good related question. So, all right, you got the right team, the right mix of people, perhaps the right methodology. What must you stop? I mean, because indeed now the Skunkworks is now called hothouses or greenhouses, whatever they call them. So, but you must stop and make time and space, mental space, for this to work. So, how does that work? How do you allocate time? And anybody?
For us, we've got our core business, which is the exchange business, and that's mature, but it's vulnerable because people are moving away from the middle. So for us, focusing on health is almost a survival imperative. So everything that we're building that doesn't pertain to health in some way, we stop. So the entire business is shifting its focus to health. So that's everybody.
But in terms of timing,
In time,
Yeah.
it's identifying which is the part that we can build for quickly that can be expanded out. So this is the minimum viable product. Where at the moment that's building something that allows us to recruit for clinical trials and to plug into a lot of publishers that have specific health inventory, because that can be expanded to recruit to target healthcare professionals and patients and everything else off that basic skeleton for clinical trials.
what's the ideal time frame beyond the seminar where you would say, oh, this is taking way too long, you guys are distracted, go back to your day jobs?
I don't know. I think it depends on the challenge you set to find solution to. So I know Kirsten would have run workshop of a day or two, and some 4 hours. But it's just for those workshops, it's a spark. It's like giving the tools, and then they go and
But surely
replicate.
you follow up on some of the ideas that come out of the workshop. So
No, it's not our job. We,
Oh, you don't.
we
You just
just
let it go.
facilitate in that. So if you're asking me, internally at Google, I don't know the answer because it's not really the core area where I work
Right,
with. But in the case of the workshop, our role is just to facilitate, to give you the tools. But this is your product, your project to take on further. So.
Zach, the ideal gestation time for a good product, a good idea?
Some of them vary a lot. I mean, I'm conscious of Hawk. It's something that was a couple of years, just kind of
Couple of years?
It was taking long in the background around affiliates before we really started to see the opportunity of what we had. And I think you have things that you stop for whatever reason, come back to because the timing might be right, or technology is now able to facilitate the actual innovation you were looking for to begin with. I think we try to. I mean, there's lots of cliches around this. People talk about fail and fail fast and everything else. I don't think there is a one-size-fits-all for different elements, different bits of development. What I'm conscious of, and I think publishing, particularly media as an industry, is that we aren't big organisations in the way that we used to be anymore, and you don't have lots of people who are sitting about. I'd love it if anyone in this room was sitting thinking, I'm really bored all day, I've actually got loads of free time kicking around. And particularly when you're trying to get people who've got lots of company experience, but also the position within the company to drive through change, those tend to be the same people whose time's already quite pressed. So you've got to be very deliberate about, I want you to take the time out to go and do this for a particular business strategic reason, because it's a real opportunity cost of other things that they're doing. There's a seasonality in our business. And so by and large what we say is in the summer, let's go and spend more time doing the thinking, driving through the change. This time of year, most people tend to be hands on deck, actually running the business.
I think personally you just need a system of very good checks and balances, because we all get pet projects. I've already told you about one of mine. If I look back at it, I was definitely emotionally attached to a product. I put myself out there, I bought something, and I was hanging on to it because of personal pride and all that sort of stuff. So what you need is a team environment, don't you, where you have good challenges, because all of us do it. And so if you get that right, I think, then you'll probably generally get those decisions correct. Because we could each of you could probably name 5 pet projects of different people in your businesses right now. Right. And that's my view anyway.
Ben, gestation time for a good digital product? You?
Again, it's how long is a piece of string? For us, for
In your own experience, would you have actually
and
done?
when the crux of the issue we've got with health at the moment is that we've recruited a whole lot of people whose focus is exclusively on health, and we've got the other rest of the business. So it's less about building this health product and how long that's going to take, and more how quickly can we get the rest of the business behind it. And that's the challenge. It's one of those things you just have to keep saying over and over and over and over again to get people bought into what we're doing.
This question came after we were thick into the discussion of buy or build, but somebody say there's a third way to partner. Anybody?
Well, we do a lot of that, and actually a whole technical strategy is based around not building your own and using other people's products as much as possible. It's a lot of Google stuff, obviously, but the fact that we built our CMS out of Drupal, gone are the days probably of people building their own product from the start. Whether that's whole sort of like white labeling and licensing products, less so for us probably, but certainly taking individual pieces of technology, don't build your own header bidder, use somebody else's, whatever else. So.
To partner?
Yeah.
How much partnering do you do?
Lots and lots,
yeah.
and it's the nature of the industry. I think there's lots of bits of technical innovation that you want to be part of, and you want to get on that quickly, and so you adopt working with partners. And ad tech and martech is a huge part of the industry now, and it's growing rapidly as well. It creates challenges working with lots of partners. How you build and manage your ad stack's an ongoing concern, and how that works within your own technical debt is quite difficult to manage too, so it adds an additional complexity, but it's a complete necessity of what we do. And you look for people that have expertise and specialities. I mean, we talk about data a lot. There's lots of fantastic data partners that we work with, and they've been incredibly valuable to our continued growth the last couple of months.
Okay. I'm sure
As
you
a-
want everybody to partner with Google.
Well, of course, but I'm not going to talk about the ad stack because I think that's. I'm just going to talk about my experience as an internal user of tools, and Google tends to develop their own tools, but I find that they should partner more. So, for example, they're building their own pipeline and CRM tool, which I don't think is on par with what we should expect as a product. And so leveraging something like Salesforce or something that exists out there and customizing to our needs probably would be a better play. But that's my, as an employee, that's my view on that thing.
Right. Anybody else?
How
Dilip,
about
please. If we could,
publishers?
we want to record this, so could we have a microphone for Dilip, please? Here in the front. And anybody else, so we can distribute the mic quickly? No? All right. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, how about publishers partnering with each other? Do you ever think, I wish that I could, or is it more about, I wish I could?
Depends the day of the week you ask me, Dylan.
Look, I'm sitting in the middle here, so
No, I think it's something, and so the AOP is a big facilitator of having discussions. I think you see examples of more and more partnerships in the industry happen. I haven't been in the industry all that long, so I don't know all the background, but I suspect there was a lot of it before where people tried to get projects off the ground. I'm conscious there's been several that haven't worked recently, and so there's something about us working better together that's quite important. There is existential changes to the industry which is helping to facilitate that at the moment. Part of that is new competitors coming in, competitors that have scale, and Google being one, and Facebook being another. Increasingly now you see Amazon coming into the market. These create new opportunities and new threats, and so there's an argument for publishers to work together more to create a fairer competitive landscape, because as individuals it's quite hard to compete, but when we put it together we are an equal entity. However, that's not easy because our businesses are so different. I think there's greater appetite to work together now, more.
I think there is. I think it's imperative. I think it's bloody hard, though. It's quite easy to do it between two publishers, and we have a number of examples of doing that, whether it's just Dennis and one other partner. Trying to do something more collective is harder, but I think we've come a long way, actually, as an industry. I think publishers didn't, well, apart from a couple of obvious examples, maybe in distribution and circulation and all that sort of stuff, where they used to work together, Frontline and products like that. Apart from stuff like that, there aren't that many examples of it in the past, and it was very competitive. But that's not our big battle right now, is it? I mean, we've got bigger existential threats to what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
So we should be being more collaborative. But the practicalities of it are quite hard, I think, at times.
If I may, I'd like just to plug the DNI here, because I've got examples in Belgium where they have been partnering with startup and academics. So there is another model to look at here, where a media publisher has partnered with a startup and an academic to bring a product for them, but also that product could be commercialized. So there is an element of longevity and viability.
Yeah,
so that's another model that could be explored in the
which
UK
a lot
market.
of big corporations have been doing for a long time with universities. Sure.
Yes.
Right. We did answer the top question, but I do want to give an opportunity. If anybody's here from editorial, because it's not represented here, in this process of innovation, in this existential chase for revenue to sustain our business, anybody wants to come in to talk about, do you feel threatened? Do you feel that indeed the primordial responsibility you have as publishers might be diluted because of this e-commerce plays? Anybody from editorial? Nobody?
Can I
Again,
reframe?
we're uncomfortable silence. It works. Here we go. Alistair, right?
Gary.
Gary, sorry.
No.
Go ahead.
Next question.
Yeah.
I'm at 442. We do some commercial partnerships. I think, as you said before, you just have to be honest about it.
Okay.
As a user, I don't think people mind commercial tie-ins as long as it's clear. It's the hidden aspect of it. If you know that I mean, it comes back to things like native advertising, those kind of things. If I know that Volvo have paid a lot of money so that a fantastic director can film a beautiful piece in the Canadian mountains, I don't care that Volvo have paid for it. It's fine, I'm watching a piece of editorial content. For things like this, I'm actually looking for I'm looking to buy something at the end of it. So that's fine. As a user, I don't mind at all. As an editorial person, obviously I have to be careful of that, and I have to make sure that we are completely honest and straight with it. But I don't really see a massive problem. And the wall between church and state, we can keep it up forever if we want, but we're not going to make any money. So no, in short.
Good. Okay. Let me. Do you want to comment? No, sorry. You're distributing the mic. Sorry. May I talk about the next frontier of digital innovation? Everybody's talking about it. It's not in the agenda this year, but of course, I'm sure you're going to have seminars and discussions, artificial intelligence, and the role it will play in changing our businesses massively and so on. Where do you see artificial intelligence in this process? Because in a way, we could also ask a machine to at some point come up with the insight and so on. So how much innovation do you foresee being driven by insights from artificial intelligence?
Lots, and I think it's not as scary as, one can make it look scary. So you refer to machine learning. So I would refer to machine learning. It's how you effectively leverage technology at scales and learning from data at scale to refine and improve, a piece of conversion, an editorial output. And it's all about saving time, making it better, so you can do what is your core business better. That's how I see it. But yeah, totally. And so I'm going to do another plug on D&I, I'm sorry, but all the projects we see that are coming through, and I wish Ludovic was here to give you the landscape of the ideas, but there are lots of things about conversion. So, if you have content behind a paywall, is how you improve that conversion, and applying machine learning on identifying the piece of content that would work better for the conversion, or all those signals that would work better for the conversion. So that's one thing. Another one is, I think there's been lots of articles written about it, but the Press Association robot project, where they're going to leverage, a data source across the UK and localities to bring editorial for the local journalism, which will save time to the journalists in the region who are already pressed for time to report on everything. That's another example. So it's how you apply it, but the capacity is there. The CPU or whatever, I'm not technical, but the processing power in the cloud is there to make it available and accelerate the innovation. So that's how I see it. It's doing what you already do, but faster and better.
Yeah, so we started doing more around machine learning. We're conscious that it's a big opportunity for us. I think when you look at innovation generally, shorter feedback loops in terms of is this working or is it not, what are the results, that's what helps drive innovation effectively, and you can get the feedback and iterate on the product very quickly. Machine learning enables that, and that's something that we're trying to do more and more of. AI is a bit of an unknown entity still, by and large, and I'm not conscious outside of the very big tech companies. I could point to examples of saying there's a company who's deployed it effectively and you can see real business benefit. And we've not got into it yet, but my suspicion is it's ferociously expensive to start investing in. And the new talent you require to make that a thing in your business is again another unknown entity to us. We've changes in programmatic and in machine learning means we've employed more statisticians and mathematicians than ever before. But what you need to make AI work in your business is a good question. We just don't know yet. But as we try to do things at scale, and we talked about earlier about customizing user experiences, these new bits of technology will definitely help to facilitate that. We just need to work out how we implement it into the business in a manageable way.
AI? To you, Pete. To you.
Similar answer, really. It feels a bit like with machine learning. I think that's going to just become a natural part of a lot of applications. It's a bit like that. Do you remember when people used to think that computers were coming, and then a computer would run your whole house? You'd have one big computer, and then everything would run off your computer. And actually, what happened was your washing machine's got a little computer in it. I mean, you know what I mean? So it's kind of like a little bit of technology's gone into every device. Your coffee machine will tell you when it's running out of beans. I don't know, I'm making that up, but you get the point. And I think that would be the same with machine learning. AI, I'm not sure about at all, really. I'm not sure where it will end up. We've done 2 projects on machine learning so far. It's quite hard to do at the moment. Been interesting discovery sort of phase. Turning it into something you can actually use has been quite hard to come up with, but it's been an interesting experience.
But I think Benedict, what she said is quite insightful. I keep hearing this repeatedly, that perhaps the way to go about it is like the voice of God, and you sort of ask God, price elasticity, people's disposition to do so. The data is there. It's just a question of knowing how to ask somebody or some way. This is a question, as we're developing this model, this prototype, how much money could we really go if we go this way or that way? Ask the cloud.
I think it's about the scale of the data. So because the machine learning process will only be as good as the input you have in the data set you're playing off. So if you think about the Google Photo, I used the example I used earlier, it's because the data set is immense, and so you can apply machine learning and to that visual recognition as well. So I think it's a combination of the computing power increasing, so visual recognition is faster because you have the processing power that goes behind the scene, but also it's the data set. And so I don't know the answer, but I don't know what the difference is between artificial intelligence and machine learning, actually. If somebody have the answer to that, because to me, machine learning is just, the how you train a machine to develop a more clever way to deal with that data set. And whether artificial intelligence is something different, I don't know.
Ben, do you know?
I think maybe a question of scale. Like machine learning, if you've funneled enough data into it to digest, then eventually it becomes an AI and turns into Skynet. Oh, obviously, we're all woefully underprepared for AI questions. One concern that I've heard raised is if you're getting AI to solve for a particular problem, say, how much can I charge for this product? One of the things that GDPR is bringing in is the right to understand how a decision is made as it pertains to you. And I think one of the things of AI is its incredible complexity, and that will make it very difficult to say then pump an output and say, oh, here's how we've decided how much we should charge you for this phone or for this car insurance or for a mortgage. And that's something just to be aware of if people do start exercising that right.
But just on that, we talk about AI as though it's a thing that's already there and we should all just be tapping into it, right? I'm not going to go up to IBM Watson and say to it, hey, what's the new brand that I should open up tomorrow? This thing needs to be built. What have Google taught it to do? Taught it to play Go. It's playing checkers. Fantastic. Why does that help my business model right now?
So can I challenge you on
just
that?
your way.
No, go for it. Let's have it.
No, I don't know much about, but I think there are some APIs that have been, already tried by some of your peers. So, for example, I know that Hearst have been playing with the visual recognition. So, for example, they have an article with a photo of whoever, a celebrity carrying a Gucci bag, and then they can do affiliates advertising next to that. It's that applying. So I think it's more simple APIs, machine learning APIs that could help you. Same for speech to text or text to speech. I never know. So you can just plug that machine learning API, and it will do it for you.
And so
I
get that entirely, but these sound like elements of automation to me rather than artificial intelligence, where you're saying that this is something a human's doing at the moment, you're teaching the machine to do it, and you're just doing it at scale and volume, and that's something we're naturally moving into, and programmatic's the most explicit example of it. But actually having it recreating the intelligence, that ideation bit, we're talking about innovation here. Innovation is the delivery of the idea, but what's the idea? Where does that spark come from? I think that's where people are expecting AI to be this new leading light, and I think it can be. I'm just not clear I see
I
it
think
just
the
yet.
output is only as good as the data you put in.
Which I completely agree with, which is my point entirely
Yeah.
about it's taking so much energy to teach the machines to do what they can now. The thought of the work required to get them where they will inevitably get to is amazing, but it's a lot of work before we get there. But I think, like you said, increasing computer power will make that scale much more quickly.
Let me conclude with where you see are the future digital money rainbows. You found one with e-commerce, you found one as well. But where else? Where else are you looking for digital revenue beyond these wonderful plays you've had? And also your insights as well. Where else are we going to find, through innovation, through clever products, real digital revenue?
I think you'll see more and more direct relationships with the consumers again. So we're getting into paywall at the moment. Okay, and paywall's not a new idea, but changing it into
So reader revenue?
reader revenue, exactly, but then doing more things which are value additive to them. So we talk about subs and clubs. It's not just about charging for the content, it's about offering additional services, additional products on top of it, which are premium, behind paywall and metered. But actually understanding those users better and having much more of a qualitative relationship and a quantitative relationship to start looking at what those new opportunities are. What else is it they're trying to do? How can
But
we
anything
help them?
specifically you're looking at the moment?
Like our big investment this year is like around subs and clubs, so paywalls,
Clubs.
metered access and additional content. And we've got a lot of offline activation going on as well on the back of it about let's have that relationship with that user physically in a specific location. So putting on more events, understanding how we can engage with audiences further. But it's
Okay, so membership.
exactly
Beyond,
digital
okay.
facilitation for more revenue opportunity.
Your case?
Similar. Obviously, a long way to go with e-com and affiliate revenues. But yeah, membership and clubs for certain types of pieces, more experiential stuff. So going to events in certain areas and not,
But that's offline.
Yeah, but it's monetizing audiences. I mean, that's what we
Okay,
do, isn't it?
yeah.
So does it matter? No,
of course it doesn't.
No.
Yeah.
So I wanted to pick you up actually on one of the things you said, which is that right at the beginning of your opening piece, you said now the focus is on revenues. And it used to be on something else before. It's always been the focus on revenues. I don't think anything's changed. I just think it's become more complex. Our CEO does something quite often at management conferences where he shows the management accounts of our company from 10 years ago and now, just to show the complexity of the business, because it used to be quite simple, really. You'd have reader revenues in subscriptions and news trade, and you'd have your advertising revenues, and largely that was the biggest lump of most people, consumer publishers' revenue mix. And now we have to do so many things to just find those little pockets of cash. So it is. I mean, I talked about diversification. We've all talked about diversification, but it will be, innovating, and part of the question is I don't know. I mean, that's the part of this process, isn't it? We're all thinking about ways that we can try and find cash.
In your case, you're emphasizing native advertising and the fact that you can scale your programmatic platform to very, very targeted new forms of advertising beyond display.
Yeah, and one of the reasons we're focusing on health, but this can apply to a lot of other verticals as well, is that health is quite slow to shift to digital. So there's a big opportunity there if we can actually provide a home for it once it's there, which means making a safe environment to advertise in. But that can apply to business or anything else. So it's often industries that are not maybe necessarily consumer facing, but are offering something different.
But indeed, you get the last word on this. What are your insights? What are you? I mean, you're not.
Well, I don't think so. All of you know that we are working on helping publishers with their subscription stuff. So hopefully there will be new things coming out in Q1 of next year, and we're talking to most of you to try to define that product roadmap, and hopefully it will help a little bit in improving the readers' revenues, which is only one part, I realize, in the diversification. But at least for us, it's a big shift.
I know it's a big shift.
It's a really big shift. So.
And are you going to keep 30%?
Well,
I need to ask.
you can ask. I don't know the answer, but I don't think so. We are. This is not about making money. We're going to.
Really? Okay.
Well,
It's
if you think about our mission statement, and I know it's lofty, and I know all of you will think, well, here she goes again, but our mission is to organize the world's information. If there is no quality information out there, So we have a vested interest in making it work and, try to be part of the ecosystem.
But there were some reports in the Financial Times just 2 days ago that the conversations have begun with them and with others. And when this question has been asked up front, the answer's been cagey. It's not been explicit. It's like, well,
Because it's being worked out. There is no other. And if you think about the enabling payments, and I'm sure you will testify to that, there is a lot of people to keep happy in the chain, right?
a lot of middlemen, yes.
Yeah. So like the banks, the credit cards, people.
Yeah.
So it's just
Platforms.
about working out the details of that.
Okay.
So I know I'm not answering the questions, but hopefully I'm less cagey.
Yeah. No, but it's good to talk about this as it's coming up.
Yes.
And I'm sure it's going to be a discussion you'll be having in private with everybody here. Benedict, thank you so much. Zach, thank you so much. Pete and Ben, we thank you. And lunch is served. Thank you.